Related Services Referral Tracker in SharePoint, you go to the SPED tab, and then you scroll down to the list of trackers, or the list here. And this is where all the other trackers are listed. And you can see here the Related Service Referral. Anytime you have a student on your caseload or that you're holding the meeting for that has any kind of therapy, speech, OT, ABA, orientation, any kind of therapy that they're receiving that you've either added or taken away or are requesting an evaluation for, you must fill out a tracker for. Now, if it's a psychological evaluation, you do need a tracker, but that goes here in the psychological referral. So the only evaluations that go here are the ones dealing with the actual therapies. So to create the tracker, you're just going to click Related Service Referral, and then you're going to select New, and this screen will show up. I scrolled past the New because I didn't want any student information to be shown, but you're going to fill out all the necessary information. Anything with an asterisk is required, so if you do fill out everything and click OK and you stay on this screen, then that means you haven't filled out something that was necessary. You know you filled it out correctly and everything's been filled out that needs to be if you go back to that main screen where all the students' names are listed. So you're going to fill out all the information that's requested, the student ID number, the program, special education, grade level, whatever the grade level of that student, the student's first name, the student's last name, and be sure you're really reading each of these statements correctly. So I know sometimes we get in a rush at the end of the meeting, especially if it's at the end of the day. We know it's important to get these in there, so we want it in there. But it's really important to make sure you fill this out correctly. So I don't want to put, like, for example, intake on the case manager last name, because that's not going to help Lindley, Vieta, and Katie know who the case manager is. So make sure you fill out everything correctly and accurately. And this is really important to note. Make sure you fill out the Related Service Referral Tracker the day of the actual IEP meeting. The day that those services were requested or changed or, up for evaluation, because the Related Service team has a very short turnaround to get these services set up to stay compliant. So I know sometimes at the end of the day, if you have a late meeting or one that goes past 5, you think, I'll just wait till the morning. And that's okay if you want to wait to finalize the IEP till the morning. But for the Related Service Referral, really take that extra 5 minutes at the end of the meeting to fill this tracker out. So that way that team is given as much time as possible to find the closest provider. So we're filling out all the information, the student status. A new referral would be if you're adding a new service or if it's a new student and no tracker has ever been filled out. So any kind of new service. Updated referral would be a student that's previously receiving that service, but you're either changing the amount of time or you've held the annual review or an amendment and the dates are changing. ESY obviously is extended school year. Compensatory. Dismissal from service. It's really important that you fill out a tracker if a student is found no longer eligible, for example, for speech language, and they no longer are getting speech language services. You still need to complete a tracker so that the team knows that those services are no longer being needed. Also, if a parent revokes consent for special education services, you'll need to do that as well. So select whatever your option is, your student status. The service, you want to choose whatever kind of service that you're requesting. So OT, speech, whatever service you're requesting. If you are requesting any kind of evaluation, this is really important. You must attach a PCE or a parental consent to evaluate. And to do that, you just select Attach File, find the consent to evaluate that the parent has agreed to sign virtually, click OK, and you can tell if it's been added correctly because if you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see that little attachment there, and that way you know it's been added. I do want to make one important note. The parental consent to evaluate can only be signed during an actual IEP meeting. So you cannot have the parent give you permission via the phone. And the reason for this is we really need to have that parental consent to evaluate, that it's documented in the actual minutes and in the IEP, and that's noted there. So again, if it's an eval, make sure you can attach that consent to evaluate. And if you are requesting an FBA, make sure you've attached a copy of the behavior intervention plan. So I'm going to say I'm doing OT. My service start date is the day of the meeting. So say I held the meeting today. This is an annual, so I'm going to change it to the end date of the actual IEP. If you are requesting an evaluation, that is 30 days after the meeting. That doesn't include weekends, but it's 30 days after the meeting. So you can look at your Outlook calendar and count 30 days forward. And then per session time. So, and you can see the little notes they've added to make it helpful, but make sure this is not how much they receive per week, but how much per session. So if, for example, if they have on the IEP, if it lists 2 30-minute sessions a week, the total of out-of-class time should still read 30 minutes because you're reading it's 30 minutes per session, not per week. So I'll show you an example. So say that was written in the IEP as 2 30-minute sessions a week. I'm not going to choose 60 here. I'm going to choose 30 minutes. Now here is when I'm going to reflect that it's 2 times per week. Again, if it's an evaluation, you can choose eval. If it's not listed in the IEP how many times per week, you can just click just per. So for example, if it was 60 minutes per week, and that would allow the provider, they could break it into 2 30-minute sessions or do 1 60-minute session. The duration, again, if it's an evaluation, you would select that. If it's per week or per month, you're going to select that choice there. The service model, a lot of times you'll just select not specified in the IEP. The only time you're going to select virtual or face-to-face is when you actually have discussed during the meeting, and it's documented in the meeting for OT and speech that there is a preference for virtual or face-to-face. The team cannot promise a face-to-face provider. It really depends on where the student lives. But if there is a clear preference indicated in the IEP, or they might have a disability that doesn't allow them to have that online speech services, then you can document that. But otherwise, most often you're just going to select not specified in the IEP. Notes, you only need to fill off for those one-off situations, anything that Lindley, Dieta, or Katie may need to be aware of. Case manager's first name, you're going to fill out your first name here. Has the student had an address change since the last tracker? If you know that they've had an address change, select yes. If they haven't, select no. If there was an address change, just make sure that Infinite Campus address is correct, because that's the address the related service team is going to use. If there is a face-to-face provider, that's the address they're going to use to find the closest provider. So yes. Did you attach a PCE, which is a parental consent to evaluate? Yes, no, or it's not an eval. If you say yes, you need to make sure that that parental consent to eval was agreed to be signed by the parent during the actual meeting, and that you can see it attached here. And then don't password protect that. Since it is in SharePoint, it's a secure area, so you don't need to password protect it. The school, if you're elementary, middle, or high school, and then your lead's last name. And then you're going to click OK, and I'm not going to click that because I don't want this saved, but you're going to click OK, and if everything's done correctly, you'll go back to that main screen. If you have any questions, just let the related service team know, and they'll be happy to help you.